Welcome to HOA Craze. She used parking enforcement like a personal grudge. I need your payment, Teresa said, standing under the eave with a clipboard and a roll of bright warning stickers in her hand. Taryn demanded I show a lease addendum and screamed that refusing meant non-compliance. I told her I owned the place outright and she could check the county records herself. She peeled a sticker off the roll and slapped it on my car window, rain streaking down the glass behind her. I work as a postal carrier in Sandy, Utah, and I hear all the gossip on my route. Fairview Ridge Association has a reputation for turning parking enforcement into blood sport. I moved here 6 months ago because the price was right and the commute was short. My shift starts at 4 in the morning, and if I lose gate access or get my car towed, I lose my job. Teresa Evans is the HOA vice president, and she has been circling my property like a hawk ever since I refused to attend her welcome committee mixer. The cold open happened on a Tuesday night. I pulled into my designated spot after a 12-hour shift and found Teresa waiting under the eave with her clipboard. She told me the parking lines had been repainted wrong, and my car was now in violation, even though I was perfectly inside the lines. I asked her to show me the new rule in writing. She told me the board passed it last week, and I should have attended the meeting. I said I work nights, and she knew that. She said ignorance of the law is no excuse, and started peeling another sticker. That is when I noticed the orange reflective marker at the curb. It was new. I had never seen it before. Teresa planted it there, like a warning, a little flag that said this spot is mine now. I asked her what the marker meant. She said it marked the edge of the fire lane buffer zone, and my front bumper was over the line. I measured with my phone. I was 3 feet back from the marker. She said the measurement did not matter because the rule was about perception and safety, and she had already called the tow company. I called my friend Liz, a local paralegal who helps me organize documents when my route paperwork gets messy. She told me to photograph everything and check the HOA meeting minutes. I went inside and pulled up the association website. The minutes from last week showed no vote on parking rules. The agenda did not even list parking as a discussion item. I took screenshots and sent them to Liz. She replied with 3 words, "They are lying." Teresa knocked on my door 20 minutes later. She said the tow truck was on the way, and I had 15 minutes to move my car or pay the tow release fee. I asked her for a copy of the board resolution. She said it was not finalized yet, but the rule was already in effect. I asked how a rule could be in effect before it was finalized. She said I am calling management, and I am going to be dramatic about it, pulling out her phone and dialing while standing on my porch. I heard her leave a voicemail for the property manager, saying I was being non-compliant and she needed immediate backup. I printed the meeting minutes and highlighted the missing parking vote. I also printed my architectural request from 4 months ago, the one I submitted when I repainted my front door. The request was approved in writing by the board. Teresa signed it herself. The approval letter said all exterior changes were acceptable as long as they met community standards. I had a hunch she was going to claim I never got approval for something, so I kept a clean copy in a binder. The tow truck arrived at 9:30. The driver was a younger guy, with a company logo on his shirt and a handheld scanner clipped to his belt. Teresa waved him over and pointed at my car. He asked to see the authorization. She handed him a printed form with her signature at the bottom. He asked if the HOA had authority to tow from private property without owner consent. She said the covenants gave the board full enforcement power. He said he would need to see the covenant section in writing before he hooked the car. Teresa said she would email it to him right now and started typing on her phone. I stepped outside with my binder. I told the driver my car was legally parked in my assigned spot and the HOA had not voted on any new parking rules. He asked Teresa if that was true. She said the vote happened at a closed session and I was not entitled to see the minutes. I handed the driver the printed minutes showing no closed session and no parking vote. He read them and looked at Teresa. She said the minutes were incomplete and the real vote was recorded separately. He said he could not proceed without proper authorization and got back in his truck. Teresa turned on me. She said I will bury you in notices until you run out of printer ink. She said she would file a new violation every single day until I sold the house or moved out. She said the board had already discussed making an example out of one homeowner, and it was me. I asked her to repeat that last part. She did. I held up my phone and showed her the voice memo app. Recording. She went silent for 3 seconds, then said recording without consent was illegal. I said Utah is a one-party consent state, and I was the one party. She walked away without another word. Liz called me the next morning. She said she pulled the HOA corporate filings and the board did not have a quorum at the last meeting. Only 3 members attended, and the bylaws required 5 for any vote to be valid. She said any rule passed without a quorum was legally void and unenforceable. I asked her if Teresa knew that. She said Teresa absolutely knew that and was betting I would not check. Liz told me to file a formal records request for all parking-related correspondence and board meeting recordings. I drafted the request and emailed it to the property management company with Liz copied. The property manager replied 2 hours later. She said the board would provide records within 10 business days as required by state law. She also said Teresa had submitted a formal complaint alleging I was harassing board members and creating a hostile environment. The complaint included a request to suspend my gate access pending a hearing. I forwarded the email to Liz. She said suspending gate access without a hearing was retaliation and possibly illegal. She told me to request an emergency hearing in writing and cite the state statute on member rights. I sent the emergency hearing request that afternoon. I also sent a separate email to the full board asking them to confirm whether the parking rule had been voted on and when. 2 board members replied. One said she was not aware of any parking rule change. The other said he missed the last meeting and had not seen the agenda. Neither of them mentioned Teresa. I saved both emails in a folder labeled evidence. Teresa showed up at my door again that night. She had a stack of printed notices in her hand, each one listing a different violation. One said my trash cans were visible from the street. One said my porch light was too bright. One said my car was parked in a guest spot even though I was in my assigned spot. I asked her how many notices she planned to file. She said as many as it takes. She said the board had already agreed to fast-track my violations to a hearing, and she would personally recommend a lien on my property. I asked her when the hearing was scheduled. She said tomorrow at noon in the clubhouse. I said I never received notice. She said she was giving me notice right now, and walked away. I called Liz. She said a 24-hour notice for a hearing was not legal under the bylaws, and I should show up anyway with all my evidence. She said she would come with me as a witness. I printed everything: the meeting minutes, the emails, the voice memo transcript, the architectural approval letter, the quorum logs, and the property manager correspondence. I put it all in a 3-ring binder with tabs and brought a second copy for the board. The hearing was not in the clubhouse. When I arrived at noon, the door was locked and a handwritten sign said the meeting had been moved to the gatehouse lane. I walked down to the gatehouse and found Teresa blocking the lane with her car. She was standing next to it with her clipboard and her phone, yelling at someone on speaker. A line of cars was backed up behind her, honking. A gate technician with a tool bag was trying to get past her to fix the gate motor, but she kept stepping in front of him. Teresa saw me and ended her call. She said the hearing was cancelled because I did not submit my evidence packet 72 hours in advance. I said the bylaws only required 24 hours and I had my packet right here. She said the rule changed last month and I should have checked the website. I asked her to show me the rule change. She said it was posted in the members-only portal. I logged into the portal on my phone and searched for rule changes. Nothing. She said I was looking in the wrong section. I asked her to show me the right section. She said she did not have time for this and I needed to leave. The gate technician stepped forward. He said he had been listening, and he wanted to know why Teresa was blocking the lane when residents were trying to get through. She said she was conducting official HOA business. He said blocking traffic was not official business, and he was calling the property manager. Teresa said she would have him banned from the property if he interfered. He said he worked for the gate company, not the HOA, and she had no authority over him. He pulled out his phone and made the call. The property manager arrived 15 minutes later. She parked across the street and walked over with a folder under her arm. She asked Teresa why the hearing was moved without notice. Teresa said the clubhouse had a scheduling conflict. The property manager said she checked the calendar and the clubhouse was available. Teresa said the conflict was internal and not subject to member review. The property manager said that was not how it worked and the hearing needed to be rescheduled with proper notice. Teresa said the hearing was not rescheduled, it was cancelled, because I failed to meet the evidence deadline. The property manager asked to see the rule requiring 72-hour evidence submission. Teresa said it was in the bylaws. The property manager opened her folder and pulled out a copy of the bylaws. She flipped to the hearing section and read it aloud. It said 24 hours. Teresa went quiet. The property manager asked her if she had any other basis for canceling the hearing. Teresa said I was being hostile and disruptive, and the board had the right to postpone hearings for safety reasons. The property manager asked what safety concern existed. Teresa pointed at me and said I recorded her without permission. The property manager said Utah was a one-party consent state and that was not illegal. Teresa said it was unethical. The property manager said unethical was not a legal standard, and the hearing would proceed today at 2 p.m. in the clubhouse. She handed Teresa a key and told her to unlock the door. If you are enjoying this HOA nightmare, smash that like button and subscribe for more stories where the Karens get what they deserve. I went back to my place and called Liz. She said she was already on her way, and she had pulled the full board roster with contact info. She said 2 of the board members lived out of state and had not attended a meeting in over a year. She said the quorum requirement was 5, and Teresa had been holding votes with only 3 members present, which meant every vote for the past year was invalid. I asked her if that included the parking rule. She said it included everything. I asked her if Teresa knew. She said Teresa absolutely knew and was counting on nobody checking the math. The hearing started at 2. 4 board members showed up, which was still not a quorum. Teresa sat at the head of the table with her clipboard and her stack of violation notices. The property manager sat to her right with her folder. Liz and I sat across from them. Teresa opened the hearing by reading the list of violations: unauthorized parking, trash can visibility, porch light brightness, and failure to maintain curb appeal. She said each violation carried a $50 fine, and the fines would continue daily until I complied. She said the board had already voted to authorize the fines, and the vote was final. I asked her when the vote happened. She said last week. I asked her to show me the minutes. She said the minutes were not finalized. I opened my binder and pulled out the minutes I had printed. I said these minutes show no vote on my violations and no quorum present. Teresa said those minutes were incomplete. I said they were downloaded directly from the HOA website and certified by the property manager. The property manager nodded. Teresa said the website was not updated in real time. I said state law required minutes to be posted within 30 days, and it had been 8 days since the meeting. Teresa said the law did not apply to closed sessions. I said the meeting was not listed as a closed session, and the bylaws required advance notice for closed sessions anyway. One of the board members, a man named Rick, raised his hand. He said he was at the meeting last week, and there was no vote on parking or violations. He said the meeting was about landscaping bids and nothing else. Teresa said he was misremembering. Rick said he took his own notes and he was happy to share them. He pulled out a spiral notebook and flipped it open. He read his notes aloud. The meeting lasted 35 minutes and covered 3 landscaping bids. No parking discussion, no violation discussion, no vote of any kind. Teresa said Rick was not a reliable witness because he had a conflict of interest. Rick asked what conflict. Teresa said he was my neighbor and we were friends. Rick said he had never spoken to me and did not know my name until today. Teresa said that was irrelevant and his testimony was biased. The property manager interrupted. She said the meeting minutes were a legal record and Rick's testimony matched the official record. She said if Teresa wanted to dispute the record, she needed to provide evidence of a different meeting. Teresa said the evidence was in her files at home. The property manager said the hearing would continue, and Teresa could submit additional evidence later. I moved to the next tab in my binder. I pulled out the email from the property manager that said Teresa had submitted a complaint requesting suspension of my gate access. I read the email aloud. Teresa said that was a separate matter and not part of this hearing. I said it showed a pattern of retaliation and selective enforcement. I pulled out the voice memo transcript, where Teresa said the board had discussed making an example out of one homeowner, and it was me. I read that section aloud. Teresa said the recording was taken out of context. I said the context was she was threatening to bury me in notices, and she said it on my porch in front of a witness. Liz raised her hand and said she was the witness. Teresa stood up. She said this hearing was a sham, and I was ambushing the board with false evidence. She said she was calling an attorney. The property manager said Teresa was free to call an attorney, but the hearing would continue. Teresa sat down and crossed her arms. I moved to the next tab. I pulled out the architectural approval letter for my front door repaint. I said Teresa signed this letter 4 months ago, approving all my exterior changes. Teresa said that was unrelated. I said it showed the board had no problem with my property until Teresa decided to target me. I asked her why. She did not answer. Rick raised his hand again. He said he wanted to clarify something. He said he reviewed the bylaws last night and the board did not have authority to fine members without a hearing and a vote. He said the fines Teresa was threatening were not legal. Teresa said Rick was not a lawyer, and his opinion did not matter. Rick said he was a retired paralegal, and his opinion was based on the actual text of the bylaws. He said the bylaws required a majority vote of a quorum to impose fines, and there was no quorum at the last meeting. Teresa said the quorum requirement was waived for enforcement actions. Rick asked where that waiver was written. Teresa did not answer. The property manager flipped through her folder. She said she had reviewed the bylaws, and Rick was correct. She said any fines imposed without a quorum vote were void. She said Teresa needed to stop issuing violation notices until a proper vote could be held. Teresa said the property manager did not have authority to override the board. The property manager said her contract gave her authority to interpret the governing documents and ensure legal compliance. She said if Teresa continued issuing invalid fines, the management company would terminate the contract and the board would need to find a new manager. Teresa went silent. I watched her pile on threats, because that is exactly what I needed her to do. Every word she said was digging her deeper. I had been holding a trump card since the beginning, but I did not want to use it too early. I wanted Teresa to commit fully to her story. I wanted her to lock herself in. And now she had. I moved to the last tab in my binder. I pulled out a copy of the approved architectural request that Teresa pretended never existed, but this was not the copy I showed earlier. This was the original request form with a handwritten note in the margin. The note said approved per board vote, 5-0, meeting held August 10th. The date was 4 months ago, before Teresa became vice president. The note was signed by the previous board president, a woman named Sandra, who moved out of state last year. I had found the note in the county records when I pulled my property file. Teresa had no idea it existed. I slid the document across the table. I said this proves the board had a quorum and a valid vote 4 months ago. I said the same vote approved a policy allowing homeowners to make exterior changes without additional approval, as long as they met basic standards. I said Teresa had been ignoring that policy and issuing invalid violations. I said every fine she threatened was based on rules that did not exist. I asked the property manager to confirm. She read the note and nodded. She said the policy was valid and still in effect. She said all the violations Teresa issued against me were void. Teresa grabbed the document and read it. Her face went red. She said the note was a forgery. I said it was signed by the previous president and recorded in the county file. I said if she thought it was a forgery, she could report it to the county clerk and face the consequences of filing a false report. She put the document down. She said the policy was never implemented. Rick said he remembered the vote, and the policy was absolutely implemented. He said Sandra sent an email to all homeowners announcing it. He pulled out his phone and scrolled through his email. He found the message and read it aloud. It matched the policy exactly. Teresa said the email was not legally binding. The property manager said the email was an official communication from the board president and was absolutely binding. She said Teresa had no authority to override it. Teresa said she would call an emergency board meeting to rescind the policy. The property manager said rescinding a policy required a quorum vote and advance notice to all members. She said the earliest Teresa could hold a valid vote was 30 days from now. Teresa said that was unacceptable. The property manager said it was the law. One of the other board members, a woman named Janet, spoke up. She said she wanted to go on record that she did not support Teresa's actions, and she believed I had been treated unfairly. She said she had reviewed the evidence, and it was clear Teresa was selectively enforcing rules. She said the board needed to issue a formal apology and retract the violations. Teresa said Janet was out of line. Janet said she was exercising her rights as a board member. She said if Teresa wanted to continue targeting homeowners, Janet would call for a vote to remove her from the board. Teresa said that was a threat. Janet said it was a promise. The property manager closed her folder. She said the hearing was over and the violations were dismissed. She said the board would issue a written statement to all homeowners clarifying the parking and exterior change policies. She said Teresa would draft the statement and submit it to the property manager for review within 72 hours. Teresa said she refused. The property manager said if Teresa refused, the management company would draft the statement and bill the HOA for the time. Teresa said fine. The property manager said the meeting was adjourned. I walked out with Liz. She said I crushed it. I said I had been waiting for this moment since the night Teresa planted the orange marker at my curb. Liz said Teresa was going to come after me again. I said let her try. I had everything documented now. I had witnesses. I had recordings. I had proof. If Teresa wanted to keep going, I would take it to small claims court and sue for harassment. Liz said she would help me file the paperwork if it came to that. 2 days later, I got an email from the property manager. She said Teresa had submitted the written statement and it had been approved. The statement said the board had reviewed the parking and exterior change policies and determined that several recent enforcement actions were issued in error. It said all violations issued to me were void and no fines would be assessed. It said homeowners were reminded that all policy changes required a quorum vote and advance notice. The statement was signed by the property manager and copied to the full board. I printed it and added it to my binder. Teresa did not give up. 3 days later, I came home from my shift and found a new orange reflective marker at my curb. This one was bigger and brighter than the first. I took a photo and sent it to the property manager. She replied within an hour. She said she had spoken to Teresa, and the marker was not authorized. She said she would have it removed. I asked her what would happen if Teresa kept placing unauthorized markers. She said the board could remove Teresa from her position if she continued violating the governing documents. I asked her if the board had the votes to do that. She said Janet and Rick were already talking to the other members. The next morning, I found a tow yard claim ticket on my windshield. It was not a real ticket. It was a printed piece of paper with no official markings. It said my car had been flagged for towing, and I needed to contact the HOA office immediately. I knew it was fake because the phone number listed was Teresa's personal cell. I took a photo and sent it to the property manager. She said she was forwarding it to the board and recommending Teresa be removed immediately. She said placing fake tow notices was fraud, and the board could be held liable if they did not act. That afternoon, I got a call from Rick. He said the board had held an emergency meeting and voted to remove Teresa from the vice president position. He said the vote was 4-1, with Teresa voting against her own removal. He said Teresa was still a board member, but she no longer had enforcement authority. He said the board was also reviewing all her previous actions to determine if any other violations were issued improperly. I thanked him. He said he should have spoken up sooner, and he was sorry I had to deal with Teresa's behavior. Teresa showed up at my door that night. She was holding the roll of bright warning stickers and a clipboard. She said the board had no authority to remove her, and she was still enforcing the rules. I said the property manager confirmed her removal, and she was no longer an officer. She said the property manager was lying. I said I had the email in writing. She said the email was not legally binding. I said I would forward it to the police if she did not leave my property. She said I was threatening her. I said I was protecting my home from harassment. She said she would file a restraining order. I said good luck explaining to a judge why she kept showing up at my door after being removed from office. She left. I called the property manager and told her what happened. She said she would send Teresa a formal cease and desist letter. She said if Teresa showed up at my property again, I should call the police and report trespassing. I said I would. She said the board was meeting again next week to finalize the written correction that would be mailed to all homeowners. She said the correction would include a public apology for the enforcement errors and a clarification of the parking and exterior change policies. I asked if Teresa would be required to sign it. She said Teresa was not required to sign it, but the board president would sign it and it would be posted on the HOA website. The following week, I got the written correction in the mail. It was a 2-page letter on HOA letterhead. The first page explained the parking and exterior change policies. The second page listed the enforcement actions that had been issued in error, including all the violations against me. The letter said the board regretted the errors and was committed to following the governing documents. It was signed by Janet, who had been elected as the new board president. I scanned it and saved it in my evidence folder. Teresa filed a complaint with the state HOA regulatory board. She claimed the removal vote was invalid because the meeting was not properly noticed. The regulatory board investigated and determined the meeting was properly noticed and the vote was valid. They sent Teresa a letter confirming the removal and warning her that filing frivolous complaints could result in sanctions. I got a copy of the letter from the property manager. I added it to my binder. 2 weeks later, Teresa tried one more time. I came home from my shift and found a tow truck in the neighborhood. The driver was the same guy from before. He was standing next to my car with a handheld scanner, checking the license plate. I walked over and asked what he was doing. He said he got a call from the HOA requesting a tow. I asked him who called. He said Teresa Evans. I told him Teresa was no longer an officer and had no authority to request tows. He said he did not know that. I showed him the written correction from the board. He read it and shook his head. He said he was tired of the drama, and he was going to stop taking calls from this HOA. I said that was probably a good idea. The driver called his dispatch and explained the situation. Dispatch told him to unhook and leave. He got in his truck and drove away. I called the property manager and told her what happened. She said she was terminating the HOA contract with that tow company and finding a new vendor. She said the new vendor would only respond to calls from the property manager or the board president, not individual board members. I said that sounded like a good policy. She said it should have been the policy from the beginning. Teresa called me that night. I did not answer. She left a voicemail. She said she knew I was behind the board turning on her. She said I had poisoned them against her. She said she was going to file a lawsuit for defamation. I saved the voicemail and forwarded it to the property manager. The property manager forwarded it to the board attorney. The attorney sent Teresa a letter warning her that filing a baseless lawsuit could result in sanctions and attorney fees. Teresa did not call me again. The following month, the board held a special election to fill Teresa's vacant officer position. Janet ran unopposed and was re-elected as president. Rick ran for vice president and won. The board also voted to adopt a new enforcement policy that required all violations to be reviewed by the property manager before they were issued. The policy also required a quorum vote before any fines could be imposed. Janet sent an email to all homeowners announcing the changes and thanking them for their patience during the transition. I ran into Teresa at the mailbox one afternoon. She did not say anything. She just glared at me and walked away. I did not say anything either. I had nothing left to prove. The board had retracted the violations. The property manager had confirmed my rights. The attorney had warned Teresa to back off. I had won. But I knew Teresa was not done. She would find another target. She would twist another rule. She would plant another marker. That is what people like Teresa do. They do not stop. They just find new victims. 3 months later, I got an email from Janet. She said Teresa had resigned from the board. She said Teresa cited personal reasons, but Janet suspected it was because the new enforcement policy made it impossible for her to target individual homeowners. Janet said the board was looking for a new member and asked if I was interested. I said no thanks. I had spent enough time dealing with HOA drama. I just wanted to park my car and go to work and come home and not have to deal with orange markers and fake town notices. Janet said she understood. She said if I ever changed my mind, the door was open. The next week, I got a package in the mail. It was from Liz. Inside was a framed copy of the written correction, with a note that said you earned this. I hung it in my garage next to my workbench. Every time I pull in after a shift, I see it. It reminds me that sometimes you have to fight back. Sometimes you have to document everything. Sometimes you have to stand up to the Karens and the petty tyrants and the people who think the rules only apply to everyone else. And sometimes, if you are lucky and you have the right evidence and the right allies, you win. I still see the orange reflective markers around the neighborhood. Teresa is not placing them anymore, but someone is. Maybe it is a new board member. Maybe it is a contractor. Maybe it is just the HOA maintenance crew marking utility lines. I do not know, and I do not care. My car is parked in my spot. My gate access works. My trash cans are where they are supposed to be. My porch light is on. And if anyone wants to challenge me, I have a 3-ring binder with tabs and a paralegal on speed dial and a property manager who has seen enough of Teresa's nonsense to know better than to let it happen again. A few weeks after Teresa resigned, I got an unexpected call from the tow truck driver. He said he wanted to apologize. He said he had been taking calls from Teresa for months and he never questioned her authority. He said after our conversation, he started asking for written authorization before hooking any car. He said he discovered Teresa had been calling in fake tows on multiple properties, not just mine. He said his company refused to work with the HOA anymore because they did not want the liability. He said a tow vendor refusing to act without proper authorization was the right call, and he wished he had made it sooner. I thanked him. He said he learned his lesson. The Gatehouse Lane traffic jam became a legend in the neighborhood. People still talk about the day Teresa blocked the lane and the gate technician called the property manager while a dozen cars honked behind her. Someone recorded it on their phone and posted it to the neighborhood group chat. Teresa demanded the video be taken down. The group chat admin said it was public property and she had no right to censor it. Teresa left the group chat. The video is still there. Every time someone new joins the group, they ask about it. Someone always explains. The story gets a little bigger each time. That is fine with me. Janet sent another email a month later. She said the board had completed a full audit of Teresa's enforcement actions. She said they found over 30 violations that were issued without proper authority. She said the board was mailing written retractions to every affected homeowner. She said the HOA was also refunding over $8,000 in improperly collected fines. She said the board was implementing new oversight procedures to prevent similar abuses in the future. I replied and said good. Janet said she wished they had acted sooner. I said better late than never. I ran into Rick at the mailbox a few weeks after that. He said he heard Teresa was trying to get elected to a different HOA board in a nearby neighborhood. He said he called the board president over there and warned them. He said the president thanked him and said they would keep an eye on her application. Rick said he did not know if it would make a difference, but he felt like he had to try. I said he did the right thing. He said he just did not want Teresa to do to someone else what she did to me. The final piece of the story happened at the courthouse. Teresa filed a small claims lawsuit against me, claiming I had defamed her by showing the board the voice recording. I filed a counterclaim for harassment and sought damages for the time I spent fighting her invalid violations. The hearing was scheduled for a Tuesday morning. I showed up with Liz and my 3-ring binder. Teresa showed up alone. The judge asked Teresa to present her evidence. She said she did not have any evidence, but she knew I had damaged her reputation. The judge asked her how. She said I recorded her without permission. The judge said Utah was a one-party consent state and the recording was legal. Teresa said it was unethical. The judge said ethics were not a legal standard. Teresa said I had poisoned the board against her. The judge asked for evidence. Teresa said the board turned on her after I presented my evidence. The judge said that was not defamation, that was accountability. The judge dismissed Teresa's claim. Then he heard my counterclaim. I presented the binder. I walked the judge through the timeline, the fake parking violations, the unauthorized tow attempts, the threats to bury me in notices, the removal from office, the fake tow yard claim ticket, the continued harassment after removal. The judge read the documents. He asked Teresa if she disputed any of it. She said the documents were taken out of context. The judge said the context was clear. He ruled in my favor and awarded me $1,200 in damages plus court costs. Teresa appealed. The appeals court upheld the ruling. Teresa never paid. The judgment is still on the books. I do not care. I won. The final funny karma moment happened a month after the courthouse hearing. Janet sent me a link to the neighborhood group chat. Someone had posted a doorbell video. It showed Teresa walking up to a house with her clipboard and her roll of warning stickers. The homeowner answered the door and asked what she wanted. Teresa said she was conducting an HOA inspection. The homeowner said Teresa was not an officer anymore and had no authority. Teresa said she was acting as a concerned neighbor. The homeowner said concerned neighbors do not carry clipboards and warning stickers. Teresa said she was just trying to help. The homeowner said if Teresa wanted to help, she could leave. Teresa said she had a right to be there. The homeowner said no, she did not, and closed the door. Teresa stood there for a few seconds, then walked away. Karen claims she never came by, and the doorbell video plays. The group chat exploded with laughter. Someone tagged Teresa in the comments. She did not respond. She never does. The HOA retracts the parking violation in writing. They mailed it to every homeowner in the neighborhood. The letter is still posted on the website. Karen gets embarrassed when her own quote plays on speaker. I have the audio file saved. I play it sometimes when I need a reminder that justice is possible. A tow vendor refusing to act without proper authorization changed everything. The amber strobe light reflecting in wet pavement is still burned into my memory. The orange reflective marker is still in my garage, a trophy from the war. I still work my postal route. I still hear the gossip. People still ask me about Teresa. I tell them the truth. She was a bully who thought the rules did not apply to her. She was wrong. The rules apply to everyone. And when you document everything, when you gather your evidence, when you stand your ground, sometimes you win. Not always, but sometimes. And that is enough. I request an emergency hearing and present the evidence in the courthouse hallway at the last second. The judge rules in my favor. The tow truck is already in the neighborhood, and the driver says the hook goes on in minutes, but I stop it with a printed letter and a phone call. The board member admits Karen is wrong, but refuses to say it on the record, so I make the record myself. I hand the officer on scene a clean packet and ask for an incident number. The Gatehouse Lane traffic jam is legendary. The tow release receipt standoff never happened because I stopped the tow before it started. The HOA must mail a written correction to every homeowner and retract the false parking violations while Karen tries to spin it and fails. She leaves the board. She tries to join another HOA. She files a lawsuit and loses. She walks away, and I stay. I win. And now, months later, I park my car in my spot every night. I walk past the framed letter in my garage. I check my gate access. It works. My trash cans are where they belong. My porch light is on. My front door is painted the color I chose. And Teresa is gone. She is someone else's problem now. Or maybe she learned her lesson. I doubt it. But it does not matter. She is not my problem anymore. I made sure of that. Glad you tuned in today.